This is state-of-the-art video editing. You see what's going on here? This looks almost like we're in the same room.
We are indeed in the same room.
Just looks like it.
Yeah. We got the first iteration tonight of... What have we called it? We've called it Befriending Blender.
We better check they can hear us. Let's do the standard thing. First you do a...
Blancmange?
Mic test.
Huh?
Pen test, mic test. You know the joke?
No.
We did the joke about...
Oh, the joke. Oh,
joke.
yeah. Mic test?
Ben test. You see what we did there? It's like a play on words. It's like a mic test, like microphone. It sounds a bit like mic. Did you? They didn't get it. Okay, guys, can you hear us? Or in all seriousness, it's kind of quite important. Test are good. Okay, fantastic.
Excellent.
Mikey, take it away. I'll be back with a laptop in a minute so I can participate in the chat.
Excellent.
Show 'em Blender.
Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome to the first episode in this series. It's called Befriending Blender at the moment, so the first thing I want to hear from you guys is whether that's a good name or not. Ben's just moving the camera down because I'm a bit shorter than him.
I'll just stand on my knees.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Ben. So do you think Befriending Blender is a good name or not? Love to know. If
I'll be back in a bit.
Oh, I can't wait for him to return. So yeah, whether Befriending Blender is a good name, whether you've got a better name, we could always rename the series. First of all, I do want to have a look at Blender 2.8 again and getting it onto a computer. Things have changed since we were last streaming Blender 2.8, and so there are the daily builds that come out, which, you know, have actually become much more stable. I downloaded a version a week ago, and I was pulling my hair out because every time I was adjusting textures, Blender would just crash every single time. Now, it's much, much more stable, and it's only been a couple of days. But we can see this version was built on July 17th, which is today. So I'm going to go and get that downloading as well. And a warning to you guys, if you are using Blender, do not open old copies of your files or copies of your files without making a copy of them first. That's a bit Inceptionist, right? So make sure you've made a copy of your file before you go and open it in Blender 2.8. If you accidentally save it, then, well, you might have just lost your work. You may be lucky, you may be very unlucky. So make sure that you've got a copy or a backup of your work before you go ahead and open it up in 2.8. So that's just downloaded. Great, we'll get that extracting now so we can open it up and have a look. I've got a couple of ideas of what I'd like to go through, some sort of quick tips tonight and a bit of feedback from yourselves. And also, if you guys want to know anything, it's always difficult with Blender because some of the greatest projects, of course, take a while to make. So the last thing we want to do is watch me for hours on end. Just want to get those quick tips in, perhaps this evening, to work out what we want to do moving forward as well. The other thing that I've got an idea about is whether or not we just purely focus on Blender. With the upcoming environments course, which is going to be in 2.8, which is why we're focusing on it a lot at the moment, despite it being unstable. Oh, I don't want to open that. Despite it being unstable, is simply there's a lot of things with textures with environments. So I want to know whether you guys want to know. I've got this idea about in real life on Twitch, actually going outside and having a look at the real world and textures out there. Now, of course, those streams might be a bit more problematic than being inside an office. They're reliant on mobile signal, etc. But I think they could be quite good. I think they could be quite good, but I don't know whether you guys would find that interesting or not. Why is Finder not opening? Oh, silly Max. There we go, so downloads, Blender 2.8, and I'm just going to launch it from the downloads itself, Blender. Oh, yeah, anybody notice my mistake there? I downloaded the Windows version. That was genius at work here. So I'm going to get the Mac version now, and whilst that's downloading, I'm going to have a look at the chat itself and see if there's anything in here. So Befriending, 20% increase. I'm not going to touch the audio at the moment. I am going to move the microphone closer and speak into it. Hopefully that is a bit louder, and I'll get Ben to turn it up, especially if we're both on stream in a few moments. Befriending Blender sounds good. Great, works for me. Lets everybody know. Yep. New builds, more things to break. Yes. Hopefully the stream isn't lagging. Name is okay. Okay. Looks like we're slightly getting there. That's plenty loud enough now. Okay, brilliant. moving closer to the microphone works really well. Okay, now we've actually got the right version of Blender downloaded. Let's go ahead, get it open, and start playing about. So here we go. And hopefully it won't crash too much. No, you didn't sneak into the chat. I saw you come in. Oh, got to make sure. I hope this isn't going to... Ben, if you are listening, I could do with you right now so we can open up Blender, because I don't think I'm going to be able to launch this without... Oh, didn't have this last time, I don't think. Oh, Ben, help! You guys got any questions about what you'd like to see on this evening's? A couple of the topics I want to go through with yourselves are modifiers. Modifiers, a lot of people use things like the subdivision surface modifier, but they don't, well, they don't get used an awful lot, especially by beginners. And the whole point of modifiers is to make sure that you can do things quickly and easily, and make sure that you can, if you've got a very simple mesh, you can edit it really quickly. I hear a Ben coming, so we should be able to open up Blender in a second. Nino!
Stream police inbound.
Here he is.
Stream police inbound. Only Ben knows Ben's password, because it's Ben's password. Open anyway. Stop panicking about safe programs, Mac. Yes, I'm sure.
Boom. Okay. Modifiers, Mac Meltdown. Okay, I'm going to have to resize this window ever so slightly so we can still see the chat. And I also want to see my outliner as well. So there we go. Perfect.
Wickles.
Okay, so we're in Blender 2.8. Now, modifiers, some of them don't work in 2.8, so there's a good chance that we discover that. Yep, Ben's password. So we're going to... more towards realistic environments, or certainly more realistic looking, without having to spend a ton of time modelling them. So there's a couple of things that we can focus on.
Just give you a nicer screen.
Ben gives me control of the mouse again.
Show that. There you go.
There we go.
And we should be good sound-wise somewhere like that for the two of us all turned up.
Okay, brilliant.
Oh, right behind you, Mikey, if you know what I mean.
Oh. So... where should we start? I want to start with the good old array modifier, and a couple of things that a lot of people forget when they're using modifiers is your transform. So, quick refresher for people, a transform is basically if you've scaled an object, made it larger or smaller, rotated it, and just moved it in general over there. So we've transformed this cube. If we have a look in the properties panel, we can see it's got a rotation applied to it, and it's got a scale applied to it. Now, location itself, we tend to leave that alone because of pivot points, if nothing else.
Looks
and
like
the origins
it's the same as
in the
Unity.
middle.
That it transforms basically location, rotation, and scale.
Yes.
Position, rotation, and scale.
Very much so.
And then there's some other derived information here. There's dimensions and... What's the dimensions? Is that just...
That's the physical size of that cube. Now...
That's going to go with the XYZ scale perfectly, right?
No, not necessarily.
I mean, it's going to be proportional to it. If you double the X scale, you can be sure the dimension doubles, right?
It depends on where you scale it from, I think, because the dimension on the x-axis might be longer depending on the rotation.
It's just trying to give you a real-world scale indication.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Now, the important thing with any transform is, according to Blender in the background, this cube is still sat at the origin, i.e. the middle of our scene where X, Y, and Z are all equal to 0. It doesn't have any rotation applied to it, and it doesn't have any scale. And this can cause tons of problems when it comes to physics. If you've got something that's 3.4 times larger but is acting as if it's a smaller object, you can end up with some really quirky things happening. And playing with something like a simple thing like the array modifier, which we'll do first, you can see that coming out in reality. So just make this a bit smaller so it's not taking up too much of our screen. I'm going to get rid of the cube on our screen and add in a nice simple plane. I'm going to rotate it around slightly, scale it on the x-axis, and Ben does not have a number pad, so I'll just scroll in manually. I'm going to scale that a bit more in on the x-axis and lift it up as well by 1. Okay,
that's the version I want, Mikey. I'm going to grab it and follow along.
Yes, that's the version just at the bottom there. Don't get the Windows version for a Mac. I learned that the hard way. Live on air.
Does not run well.
No.
EXEs on a Mac.
No, they don't. So the modifiers tab is still over in the properties panel in Blender 2.8, and it's the wrench or spanner, click on that, and we can add modifiers. And they're split into 4 separate categories. You're either modifying existing data, generating new. Now that's an important one there. If we're generating new data, that means that we're not doing it ourselves. We're allowing Blender to do it for us, which saves us a lot of time. As you'll see in a few moments, I'm going to make something really dull because it's quick. Deform and simulate. We're going to focus on generate for the moment because most of these are currently working. Now I want to make, let's say, a fence panel or something like that really quickly, but I don't want to have to model each bit of wood individually, or this could be a roof as well if you tilt it around the other way. So the first thing I want to do is actually solidify. Now that takes this individual plane here, and if we zoom in, we'll notice it's got depth on it. I can turn that on and off. There we go. So we've gone from a plane to a real 3D object. And of course that will also have physics applied to it if you want to go through that way as well. And if you exported this, it would also work. Now notice here it's got a thickness of 1 centimeter. I'm going to make it 3 centimeters, which is 0.03. One of the other things I've noticed is that Blender now defaults to actually having some measurements in there. That's interesting because before Blender up to 2.79b, they did not have any measurements in there. They were just Blender units. So now they've got centimeters, at least you know what size you're measuring. Now, the next thing along here is nothing, absolutely nothing in real life has a sharp edge. 90-degree bends, they don't really exist, especially on pieces of wood. So the next thing we're going to add, and I'm never going to apply a modifier unless I really, really need to. So I'm just going to hide this modifier away so it's not taking up the screen. I'm going to add in another modifier, and I'm going to add in the bevel modifier. And what that's going to do is it's going to bevel the edges of this bit of wood. Now we can play with the settings here. At the moment the width is set to 10 centimeters. Doesn't make much sense when it's only 3 centimeters wide. So I'm going to set it at 1 centimeter. Type that in there. And we can see if we zoom in that it's actually got a flat bit on the top now, and it's got a nice chamfer around the corners. So it's a lot smoother than it would have been before. And this also means if we turn on smooth shading, it won't look as odd. If I turn off the modifier, we end up with some horrible rendering artifacts. Can I get... there we go. There's a horrible rendering artifact. It's trying to smooth out something and make it perfectly smooth going around it, and it just looks horrible. But if we turn on that bevel modifier, oh, it still looks horrible. Great example. Perhaps this is a bug in 2.8, not smoothing that out.
Got a few questions, Mikey.
Yep, fire away.
Keith's asking about a list of keyboard shortcuts for Blender.
I'll bring that up right now. So keyboard shortcuts for Blender. You never guess what I'm going to do. I'm going to go keyboard shortcuts. Oh, why is that opening up there? Okay, so keyboard shortcuts. There's a brilliant infographic online. Fortunately, the majority of keyboard shortcuts are remaining in 2.8. There are a few that are different. There's a brilliant infographic, so I'm going to type in infographic.
We did, Keith, start making our own list of keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah, we did.
But, you know, at the end of the day, there are better, prettier, harder, faster, stronger things that other people have made, so we focus on the course creation rather than maintaining that list.
You probably have seen this if you're into Blender at all. I think it's really well laid out. Any one of these will do. You can have a look at that on there. And it's got everything laid out in a very... it looks chaotic, but actually they're all grouped in how you would use them. So I find this infographic incredibly useful, and you can see that's 2.73. It applies even now. There are a couple of things that are different though. So one of the things that is a bit different is selecting all. So you used to be able to select all by just pressing the A key. So if I go into edit mode and press the A key twice, it used to deselect. Don't do that anymore, it's Alt and A. So that's going to be something that I'm going to have to get used to, and everybody else. And you could probably change that over in the key bindings, but in general, I like to stick with what's standard, because that's how you guys are going to open up the package. And if I start changing things around, I'll get confused as to what settings I've got personally, and then we all get in a bit of a pickle. So we've still got a plane here. Are there any other questions, Ben, before I ramble on about modifiers?
I think that can't wait for a minute. No,
okay, cool. So I'm going to ignore the fact that this looks a bit ropey at the moment.
It does, yeah. There's a little bit of grid in the background, the rendering of that. Wow.
Yeah, I wonder whether this is the Mac build. I did practice this earlier.
I'll see if it happens on this other machine as
well.
well.
It'd be useful.
Anyway, it's only minor, right?
Yeah.
But it does make you wonder whether anything's going to look right.
So I'm just going to blow up another plane on the ground now. I'm not going to bother solidifying it. It's just so we've got a shadow. Gives our object a bit of presence. I'm also just going to tweak the segments on here to see if I can sharpen up those corners. So there we go. That's nice and sharp now. Before it wasn't. I wouldn't usually ramp it up that much because you start adding a lot of polygon data, even though it's generated.
Oh no, I like that. Look at this plane. Like this, it's just better. Like you've got a red line showing you the red direction and a green line.
It's much better now. We've got this stage that we're building stuff
That
on.
looks nice.
Okay, so we've got a 3D object now. It's a boring plank of wood, but demonstration for the array modifier. Now, the array modifier is great if you've got repeating things, steps, planks, even just lampposts going down the street. If you want to lay them out really quickly, you can do so with an array modifier. So I'm just going to go into the original one here, and if I rotate it, you'll notice that the other one rotates with it, especially if I want these slats at a slight angle. What's going on there? Well, that's the whole thing about making sure you apply your modifiers. If I had rotated that in edit mode, it would have been fine. It would have gone in a straight line. However, because I've rotated it in object mode, it's applied the rotation to everything else. Now, this could be useful if you wanted the array going off in that direction. But I don't. I want it to be slatted. Now, how do I do that? Well, I could go ahead and use Control and A and apply the rotation. And there we go. We can see the slats are now in line.
There's two things weird about rotations, right? In general, in Blender and in Unity.
Yep.
Compared to just translations. In translations, they are... It doesn't matter what order you do them in. You can just move something left and then up, or up and then left. Doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
You just translate stuff. Rotations, the order matters. If I say bend your arm this way and then bend it that way, you're going to end up in a different position.
Yes.
And then they're always relative to something. A local translation and a global translation are the same thing. I move the pen, but they're not exactly the same thing. But moving that way can be the same. They can be aligned. But in rotations, you've got to be super careful about the order you do it and what you're rotating about, right?
That's especially true when it comes to animation. If you rotate the wrong way, you end up with the character's arm, let's say, flailing all over the place.
We'll do that arm thing again. That was funny. Yeah, good, good jelly arms.
Excellent. Clip that.
At 40 minutes when we do our little stretch exercise, we'll use jelly arms as the new exercise of the day.
Jelly arms. Excellent.
So we'll do that.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to rotate that round slightly and then apply the rotation as well, and they should be pretty much bang on one another just there. I'm going to change the view as well. So view, I don't have a number plag. I've just got this thing. So
it's a perfect Mac keyboard. Who needs a number pad? I'll see if I can find you one.
Anybody wanting to be productive. So we're going to view from the top, and we're going to view in orthographic perspective.
You've discovered my anti-productivity secret, Mikey.
And align view. I'm so used to keyboard shortcuts, they've moved things. Oh, walk navigation, it does exist, and they haven't put... Aha, that's mine. Thank you.
You're welcome. How's it having this beautiful assistant to help you today, Mikey?
Oh, it's wonderful. Boom, we're plugged in, and I can do things, I hope.
You don't need this, do you? I can clear you of this. It's like a surgeon here. It's like scalpel, forceps...
There we go. So now I can see my scene. I can move the... I'm going to use a constant offset rather than relative. I'm just going to move that plank out so it's roughly aligned in place. And then I can just make plenty of them. And the great thing about this is you could imagine this might be a roof as well. Keyboard, no, we don't need that. So this might be a roof slats as well, where you might want geometry where the roof actually slopes down, so you've got some occlusion on the edge, but you might not want to have individual tiles, so you can put textures across the tiles themselves, and each set of tiles could actually have an offset texture, so you could use the same texture across that. I am going to go into Blender's user preferences here and tweak a setting, and that is rotate around selection. It does not appear to be doing that at the moment, despite it being checked.
Beta software, ladies and gentlemen. It's
wow,
the way to go.
Alpha.
Oh, alpha,
Yes. So there we go. We've got a fence really quickly. And of course, you could go in and add fence posts if you wanted to, and use another array modifier using all of these. In fact, the great thing about a modifier is all of this geometry has been generated for us. And all we've done is basically put a plane there. So incredibly useful. So the 2 bits of equipment I would recommend are a 3-buttoned mouse. That's a
Even if it's one of these weird vertical
even if it's
ones.
a weird vertical one to help with wrist strain. I don't know why you have wrist strain, Ben, but there we go. And we've got number pads. Number pads are incredibly useful. They give us another surface to work on. Right. Any questions in the chat, Ben? Since I'm ready to move on to another topic.
Is that why your number pad's so squashed? You use it as a surface to work on?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. In the chat, we have a nun pad, apparently, from Twitch Dog. I think it may have been a typo, but I've asked if it's a luxury apartment for a religious lady. And thank you very much, Twitch Dog, for the 100. There's new cheer emotes on the channel. That's pretty cool. There's a whole load of new emotes. Type hash. No, I'm not. And all sorts of stuffs. And the tier 2 subscribers get a special badge, and the tier 3 subscribers get even more special badge, which has gold on it. But no, there are no questions.
There we go. Boom.
See, you say anything to me, and I just go into a promotional spiel.
I know, it's brilliant.
Just have to touch me. It's like, oh, boom, promotional spiel, go.
So there is a question just here. What is the objective you guys are going to do in that project?
What are we doing today, Mikey?
So we are introducing the Blender stream. This is a new series that we want to do, and this is great for the people who missed it very early on. Today I'm just running through a few quick tips with you all, or y'all, and then also to get what you want to do in the future as well. So we could do tips, we could even branch out slightly and not just look at Blender itself, but have a look at maybe textures, how you go out and achieve them. I would love to do in real life stream out in the wild, so to speak, but
It would also be cool just to see what you're doing in the environments course.
yes.
What you're up to
can
on
I
that.
open that on here?
Can you open it? Is it in Resilio?
It probably is. There are a couple of really cool.
So that would be cool. So what we want to do is touch a lot of surface area today, guys, so that you can tell us what you want to see more of, rather than just saying, what do you want to see, and then kind of throwing your hands open. We're going to show you a load of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when you like stuff, tell us. Cheer, chat, whatever you guys do. And if you don't like stuff, also please tell us. Say that sucks, stop.
Yeah.
Let me just make sure Resilio's open, Mikey. You
Yep.
might be able to open some environment stuff. So one example would be, it is syncing. Would be,
Cool.
do you like to see our progress on the courses? So Michael is working on the Blender Environments course right now. Do you want to see that? Do you want to see how we're getting on? Do you want more of what we're doing? Be really vocal in these early Blender
Yes, please
streams,
do.
and you will direct us to what you want. Okay.
So yeah, the thing when it comes to prototyping is it sometimes is watching us bury our heads and maybe swear.
No, we don't swear.
No, we don't swear.
We have a list of
maybe
words that are
maybe
allowed and
maybe
aren't
get
allowed.
grumpy. That's what I mean to say. Get grumpy at Blender keep crashing, which it did do to me last week, plenty. But as I say, it's much more stable now. Daily builds of Blender 2.8 are coming out daily, hence the name. And they have been progressively getting more and more stable. I was playing with textures, big part of environments last week. And every time I adjust a setting, it would just crash. In fact, last week's stream, I believe we switched over to Cycles for a bit to set up the textures, and then whipped back into Eevee, the new rendering engine, or Eve, depending on how you want to call it. And you could do that in the rendering tab just here. You can switch between Eevee or Cycles very easily, and the material setup is exactly the same in both of them. However, you do get some slightly different results. I'm just going to ask Ben really quickly. So in Resilio, courses, environments, let's see how much is this, understanding textures. So yeah, a couple of
You can right click and sync them. The whole folder probably from here. Sync to this device. There you go. Second one down.
I'll do the whole.
Won't take too long. You can't do that, unfortunately, at that level.
Oh, okay, sync to this
For
device.
whatever reason.
So a couple of things that I have been trying myself is actually creating sort of textures from with not really having source material. Having reference material is great. One of the big things I've noticed, and you kind of get into a space when you start thinking about modeling or textures, you walk past things and go, how would I make that? How would I produce this texture? And one of the things that struck me, I was just walking through quite an old town in England, and they've got all this lovely brickwork next to me. And yes, it takes someone who's into textures to say, ooh, bricks. But nothing's smooth, nothing's perfect, everything varies. Even on a brand new brick building, it might be flush on the surface and not worn away bricks, but you would certainly have variations in texture. And one of the biggest things is changing colour. If you go ahead and you produce, let's say you take a couple of bricks on a wall and you repeat them 50 times, people will pick up on the pattern. Our human brains are very good at picking up on patterns. If you've done something procedurally, it can change over the entire wall and then actually look like a real object. There is a crossover though where you could have just taken several pictures of bricks and composited them together and produced an equal result. So there's several ways you can approach texture creation, and that's the same with most things, I think, in certainly an artistic sense and a coding sense as well. There's always going to be more than one answer and never a right one. There might have been one that takes longer or has benefits and pros and cons against the other one. One of the big things, of course, if you've taken a photo, is yes, you can Photoshop it, you can edit it, but there's only so far you can go with it. If you procedurally generated something, it's infinitely changeable. You need a bit of moss on there.
It just eventually lacks personality. So
yes,
and so take No Man's Sky. It's amazing for a while, and then eventually you realise it kind of has no soul. So it's balancing those things. Yeah, I like the no right and wrong. There's just action and consequences. I'm going to slam a poll up. What would you most like to see in this Blender series? You've got 3 options at the moment. Progress on the environments or textures course. You have new features in Blender 2.8, and you have Mike and Ben wrestling. That's verbal judo. So just give us an idea. Whether it's more for why are you here? For banter? Are you for Blender 2.8, or are you for what are we doing? What's Mike doing behind the scenes the rest of the week?
We can provide all. And Blender just crashed when trying to open up a file. Oh, this is interesting. This will be a great example of cross. It'll be in downloads, won't it? So Blender. So cross-platform. So this was produced on a PC, and
does it survive the transition to the mighty Mac?
Yes, it does. So this is a simple corridor scene. If I switch to rendered mode, you will see something. Here we go. Now, it'll be interesting whether or not the textures load in. So with Eevee, when you first start, no, they're not loading in, which is always great. So I didn't pack them into that blend file. Sometimes, well, I didn't appreciate that would be across, but you can see, despite this, are there dedicated graphics on? But you can see here very quickly you've got a reasonably realistic scene. Ben will entertain you for 30 seconds, and I'll just pack the blend.
Okay, you're going to speed some stuff up. Yeah, the card here is like a sort of level, so it's just so you know what performance to expect out of it. It's reasonably fast, not super fast, just at the bottom end of VR capable. That's the idea. This was the first iMac they announced that is actually VR capable, which is remarkable. So yeah, Mikey's going to be talking you through this. There's 2 rendering modes here now, Cycles and Eve, which is also the back end of Unreal. And we'll be looking at the differences. You're going to see that with Mikey in a minute in the lighting. And he actually did a blind test on me. He said, which do you think is Eve and which do you think is Cycles? And which do you think is better? And it was quite a difference, actually, with zero setup effort between the two. And you'll see that as he goes through in a moment. So what you're seeing on the screen, to answer your question, whoever just asked, not Nick, who are you if you're not Nick? Get it? Is that this that you're looking at now is part of the upcoming environments course, which is all about environmental modeling and texturing. So this is what
these are all prototype scenes that I'm putting together just for general, part of it's fun, getting the hang of Eve or Eevee in simple scenes. That one of the things is you can get really absorbed when you start modelling, and there are so many things that you can tick and say, well, that needs improving, this needs improving, this needs improving, and that cycle can go on and on and on. And what we want to try and avoid, I'm going to try and revert this now, and it should load up the...
They're saying the sound keeps cutting out. I'm going to get some headphones onto monitor, just in case.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah, there it is. Just make sure that it's not for other people. Anybody else getting sound cutting out? Obviously not ideal if it is. There's things we can do about it if it is, but it shouldn't be. I will monitor now from now on.
Excellent, thank you, Ben. So I'm just making sure that we've got a decent scene open here. I'm going to need details. Yeah, that looks better. Simple scene has many more megs in it. Okay, so it does look like some base colours coming through. One of the things I've noticed with Eve at the moment is it does take a while to load things up, and occasionally you have to go ahead and select the area of your model that you want and literally tweak a bit. So if we just wait for Blender to catch up, there we go. So over here, one of the things that I've noticed is in the node editor, or it's not called node editor, it's now called shader editor, there's a material output that matches on both Eve or Eevee, and cycles. You can switch between the two, and there's also this option for all. And good. Let's see if we can do the same in here. Let's switch this across to all, and hopefully, yeah, there we go. There's the texture. So this is now all working and coming together really well. And let's do all here. And in good faith, I'm going to save the file as well, because what I don't want is Blender crashing after I've just done all that. So this is a scene. This primarily in Eve or Eevee to get going. So, right, shall I call it Eve or Eevee? You think I should be saying, because I'm getting fed up of saying both, and I don't know which one it is. So whichever one you guys fancy, I will say from now on. So the great thing about Eve or Eevee is that you can rapidly prototype and get things laid down.
We are losing a lot of audio, Mikey.
Yep.
For whatever reason. Trying to think what that's going to be. I'm just going to turn the volume down a tiny bit on it. Might just be cutting out because of that. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll change the audio bit rate. Try that just in case it's going over the top.
Okay. Well, excellent. If this is not breaking up, the actual streaming's not done from the computer itself. It's going off to a separate box, so it won't be Blender touching visually also. Okay. Well, there seems to be. It's when I'm on the live stream, so I must have some sort of. It literally has been.
It's not bad, Mikey. It's doing
okay. Brilliant. Hey, we've got a subscriber. Thank you very much, Burnworthy. So, so what I was saying was you're able to put together a scene very quickly. If we were playing about in cycles, I mean, if I move about in... Oh, I don't even need to move about. So, at some point, this is going to be visually acceptable, but it's nearly impossible to model unless you've got a really, really powerful computer. I am seriously talking maybe two 1080 Ti's might be quite rapid doing this. But that's a lot of money just to render a scene quickly. So what I did earlier, and I'll show you the two pictures in a moment. Or Eevee. Have we got a Eevee? I'm going to call it Eevee because it reminds me of that film, Pixar film, I think.
Which one?
Eve.
Oh,
Wall-E.
Wall-E, yeah.
Wall-E. Okay, so rapid prototype this very quickly, and then I rendered it out in both render engines, and there were a couple of things that stood out. So if I go and open up the two pictures, we've got 1 and 2. So this is number 1. Can we skip between pictures on the Mac, Ben? No.
Yeah, you can. I just don't know the keyboard shortcut.
Okay, cool.
You can go to Window.
Okay,
so put them side by side.
So we've got this image here, and we've got number 2. There we go. And I asked which Ben thought was which, and it was a bit of a head-scratching moment, to be quite honest. But one of the things immediately stood out. Well, Ben, why don't you tell them what you saw when you first?
Yeah, I'll talk you through. That's a good idea. And we'll try and talk more one at a time because I've taken the hint that we keep interrupting each other. Mainly, it's got to be me interrupting you because you're the one doing most of the useful talking. So, what I noticed on here when I first looked at it, do they know yet which one's which, Mikey?
No, I haven't.
Man, I can't do that with myself in my left ear. What I would bring your attention to is these reflections. How representative are they of those lights compared to that? I'd bring your attention to the lighting on those stairs versus the lighting on those stairs. I'd bring your attention to the quality of that texture, although it may not come across as well in the stream. It might do at 1080p on there versus the quality of the texture on the floor here. The lighting on these stairs at the back. So just given that you've had your attention brought to those few things, and also this reflection on the wall here versus this one here, a few things like that. What do you guys think, having seen that, if I can work out how to clear my VilQ, is which? Vote in the, just tell us in the chat, I guess. That'd be awesome. I won't put up another poll. I have put up a poll a minute ago, by the way, about what you want to see, and it's over, it's overwhelmingly, but by tiny numbers, that we should show what we're doing, progress on the Blender environments course.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Okay. Cool. So to put you all out of your miseries, the one on the left is Eve, and the one on the right is Cycles. Rendering time-wise, one took about 30 seconds to render out. There's, as in a higher quality than the viewport render, although you can whiz around your scene a lot quicker in real time. But the Cycles render, as expected, is much more realistic. The reflections are in the right place. So these lights up in the top, they're being reflected at the right angle. These other lights, they're not being reflected at the right angle. It's just an approximation. And this is a great example of when approximations don't work out very well. I mean, this looks like a light that's in completely the wrong place. So let's go back to Blender itself rather than just pictures of Blender. And one of the things I've recognized about Eve is that, or Evie, I still can't decide, is that you have to make sure you enable a lot of things. And I don't know whether this is true in game engines, is it, Ben, where you have to enable everything that you want to use? It's not on by default like it is with Cycles. So if you want...
So yeah, just a quick discussion around that. I think what you're saying is that something that... Hearing myself in my ear a few seconds later is super weird. In game engines are completely cheating everything just to try and get you as close to the visual illusion as possible, whilst calculating quickly.
Yeah.
So yes, if you want good lighting, you turn on light maps, you turn on ambient inclusion, you turn on the shadowing systems,
Yeah.
you turn on light probes. You just you have to keep layering and taking a performance hit for each one. Whereas with Cycles, as you know, it's basically actually quite simple. It's just tracing rays.
You take a performance hit immediately.
You take a massive performance hit, but you just trace the rays of light. So, yes, I think that's what you're trying to say there. In the game engine, you start with something that looks awful and you layer on beauty. Whereas with Cycles, it starts beautiful but super slow. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the difference between rendering in a 60th of a second and rendering in 60 seconds. I mean, it's 1,000 times
a big
slower.
difference.
You know,
yeah, definitely
huge.
A big difference. So one of the things that quality of the on the stairs themselves with Cycle is I'm going to turn off the mist. Don't look at my naming, guys, it's just a prototype. So our mist that we've got here, I'm literally going to turn it off so it's hidden from view, gives us a much clearer, and because it's volumetric, should be a lot quicker. In fact, I can turn off volumetrics as well. So this is one of the things. You have to scroll down your rendering options, and I thought shadows. Well, that's set pretty high already, so it can't be that. And I changed all of the settings there. Hi, Mark. And then Mark's appeared in the chat. Indirect lighting, I thought, well, perhaps it's getting too much or too little bounce lighting. And it turns out that it was none of that at all. It was actually in the lamp settings. So this is one of the things that you have to get your head round, that shadows are part of the lighting setup when it comes to Eevee. Whereas in Cycles, it's just, it bounces, and if something is occluded, there's going to be a shadow behind it. So just scrolling down a little further before we have a look at settings, which is part of the lights, you can see here screen. Suddenly, it than it did before. The floor, etc., etc. And there's loads of things that you can do to change here. So you can see that there's this fade line here where the floor is no longer being reflected, so you have to boost that up. Then you take a performance hit. But none of that was essential for setting up the scene. I got the gist of what the scene was going to look like. And we've got all of these other options, including volumetric. I haven't turned on anything that I'm not using. Bloom's quite a pretty one. More glary in your face. And there we go. I mean, it's as simple as that to set something up. But the lights. So the lights themselves, I set up a series of area lights, all duplicates of one another. That's interesting if it stutters when I touch the Blender scene. It shouldn't do. Ben's got a box that's separate to the rest of the computer. But perhaps there's some sort of interference going down the line. I mean, the Mac is handling the audio going through it, so I wonder whether the audio is being chopped when I'm doing something heavy in Blender. I'm just going to switch to this view at the moment, and I'd love you guys to let me know whether the audio is still stuttering, even though I'm not really pushing the computer now. We're in a very basic viewport. In fact, if I go out, you can see how this scene is constructed. And this is one of the big things with environments is fakery. It's all smoke and mirrors. Even in games, there's no point in modelling the back of a building unless it's not being used. There's no point in modelling a roof when you can't see it. So we can see the camera's placement is here. And then we're looking down this, this corridor, as it were. If we go to camera view, we can't see any of that. You can see at the very top here, we've got this area at the top, which is where the roof stops. And because, well, there wasn't any when I saved it. No, the environmental light is set to black. So there's no environmental light at all in this scene. If there were, that could impact on the scene, even though most of it is enclosed anyway. But you can see how you can get away with basically just showing the areas that you want to see. Now, that does vary a bit if you've got a game environment, because obviously if your character can turn around, your character is the camera in a game. If you go ahead and turn around, then you're going to see this great big hole at the back, which wouldn't be that great. So I'm going to turn on the rendering again. The audio around shadows here. So there are some shadows, but they're not great. And yep, it cuts out immediately. So I'm going to go to this mode, the flat shaded for the moment, and then I'm going to talk for a bit, and then I'll switch the rendered on so we know roughly what's happening at the moment. So we've got here our scene, and there are four area lights coming down, representing some simple fluorescent lights or something like that in the ceiling. Thank you very much.
We've only got about 5 minutes now.
Okay, 5 minutes. So we're going to rush through this last bit, and I'll debrief you on the audio stuttering issues.
Leave my briefs on.
Yes.
But have they stopped or?
No. I'll tell you about it in a moment. Okay. So we've got the area light options. So that is where you play about with your shadow settings. If this shadow was off, and we go and have a look at this scene, come back out again, and then I can talk. Otherwise, it will look pants. And then if we have a look with shadows turned on, we start getting shadows back in the scene. And that was one of the big things that was a difference between having basically Cycles doing it. I did not know that this setting was hidden under the area lamps. I quickly found it because I was just, it must be somewhere. You must be able to have those detailed shadows, and because they're cast by this lamp themselves, and each of the lamps themselves have different properties. So an area lamp is a directional light source from a small area. We've got a couple of other options. We've got a point lamp source, so that's like a point of light, so it'll radiate out and fade off as well. Sun is my favourite. I often start out with a sun lamp. It's unidirectional light, so all of the shadows lay in the right line. It doesn't really fade off. Your object is lit quite uniformly. Hemi, I think, is broken. Spotlight, as it suggests, produces a spotlight. Now, because all of these lamps are linked together, something I wanted to, in fact, it was my next topic, linked duplicates, they all share the same lamp data. You can see there are 4 users of it. If I hop back into rendered mode now, after, of course, stopping to talk, or stop talking, we see that we get spotlights on the stairs rather than... I'm going to start that again. We've got spotlights on the stairs rather than the area lamps. I could go to a point light. Looks very similar. And the final thing is these lamps in the very ceiling here are emissive materials. Now, interestingly, that doesn't work the same way, at least I can't see at the moment, as it does in Cycles. So if you have an emissive cube in Cycles and you set it up to an energy level of 1,000, it will blow out your scene, which you would expect it to do. It doesn't do that with Eevee. It will just decide to... It adds some light on some of the reflective surfaces, but that's about it. It doesn't really light your scene up, which goes back to what Ben was saying earlier about how you have to really optimize your scene by placing the lighting in very niche places, and be very careful about how you use lighting moving forward. And reflection maps are also something possible. Do we have enough time for reflection maps? Yes. Now I'm going to set a reflection probe, so I'm going to add in light probe reflection plane. We can see that it's facing upwards at the moment, so we're going to rotate it around the y-axis, so it's facing that way. What value do I need here? I've spun it around so many times. Minus 90 by the looks of it. Now, when I go back into rendered mode, you'll see that it looks like there's a mirror on the wall. You notice that the stairs looked a bit odd as well. If I shift this up and not moving it on the x-axis, I think, so we've got some of that light in, we'll notice that we get the reflections much more realistic and in the right place. So there's lots to play with in Blender, especially learning how to set up your scene properly and light it properly if you decide to use this real-time rendering engine. And obviously once that's done, you can switch over to cycles almost immediately. Some of the settings you do have to tweak because it handles, as we've just discovered, lighting much more differently than cycles does. Okay, are there any questions in the chat to finish off, Ben?
Yeah, sorry we're having to finish slightly early today. We've got a back-to-back streams. We're going straight from this into Mentors, then into RPG streaming. So the one question is, Ghost Stalkers has a request. He says, would you mind moving your mouse smoothly for a minute while taking in this scene? From what I can tell, the simple scene is still suffering from frame loss on the camera. You is having the same loss, frame loss. I don't know if that's about the stream or about the way Blenders work.
Go in. If I go,
what's this foreground triangle, Mikey?
That's the camera, which way the camera's facing
okay.
up. So if I go into here to navigation and go to fly navigation, there's no keyboard shortcut. It used to be Shift and F, so fly navigation. I should now be able to move around much more smoothly and fly through the scene. Perfect. And obviously talking won't work whilst doing this, so I will not talk, but I'll fly through our scene for us, and hopefully then you'll see whether there are any dropped frames as we go through. Ah, okay, so the keyboard shortcut for that does not work whilst actually flying. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed flying through my scene there. It reminded me of a very old game, Windows 95, where you flew through tunnels just like that. I can't remember what it's called.
Game that you flew through tunnels?
Yeah.
Let me see it again.
I was just flying through my scene.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of a game from, it must be 98 or something along.
Call it Tunnel Flyer 98.
Tunnel Flyer 98.
And that's the one. Awesome. Okay, guys, I think Descent, maybe Descent?
Yes, Descent.
Oh,
that was
Descent.
it, yes.
Yeah, for some reason I've got a warm, fuzzy feeling about Descent. Create that experience, guys. Create warm, fuzzy feelings about your games, however you do it. Next stream will be, now, let's just make sure we're clear, Mikey, on when our next stream is, because I'm away next week, but I think I can still do the same time next Tuesday.
Well, next Tuesday is up because I might be
you're busy.
So,
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the events page. Keep an eye on our Twitter, which is @GameDev.tv, and we will let you know when the next one is. We'll also let you know on the Blender Facebook group, which I'll post both of those now into the chat.
Excellent. I've seen a couple of questions coming up. So let's just have a look. Descent, yes. So we've got a question here with a big question mark.
And then we need to rush because we've got to make sure this is stable for the next one.
Yeah.
Question mark questions get priority because they're from amazing subscribers.
Yep, my question is all about the use of Blender in general. I've read a lot on the internet that say Blender is not adequate for professional use. Blender is a tool, and so you can produce wonderful things with Blender. One of the things when it comes to that, let's do some direct comparisons, which aren't really direct comparisons because Blender does a lot more than just what the things that Maya does, or Maya and 3D Studio Max. They're two really big industry standard ones. If you're a studio and you've got even, let's say, 10 employees, you're a small studio and they're all trained on a specific software, and you've perhaps even got plugins that you've bought for that software, retraining all of those people to use a different bit of software is very, very expensive. Blender is being adopted in industry, especially small studios, for the reason that it's completely free, it's open source, you can mod it, and you don't have to pay any licensing fees for those modifications. This real-time rendering engine is actually bringing it above a lot of its competitors, if you will. But at the end of the day, Blender is a tool. The skills that you learn whilst in Blender, whether it's lighting, material setup, rendering, those are all modeling, sculpting. You can take those sculpting skills over to ZBrush if you wanted to. You could take your modeling skills over to 3D Studio Max or Maya. You can take your animation skills over to Maya. There are loads and loads of options or loads of transferable skills. Blender gives you a platform that you can learn those skills in with an amazing supportive community. That's one of the great things, not only the game dev community, but the Blender community as a whole. And that's just the nature of the software. I mean, support is available from hundreds of people of all different skill levels. Obviously, some of them are going to be busier than others, but there we go. I think it is a professional tool, and it's basically knocked down by people who perhaps haven't used it and seen its full potential. You just have to go onto blenderartists.com, I think.
And if you spend the money that you would spend on all the licenses for the alternatives on a little bit of custom development to get it to do the things that it can't currently do,
or even professional textures,
or just and then on just augmenting it, then you could get there. Guys, we're gonna have to go for this stream because we need to check whether this sound was local or internet issues so that it doesn't happen on the next one. And we'll see you on the next stream. Keep an eye. I've told you in the chat where to go to keep an eye. There'll be another stream coming with Mikey. His next week's a little bit uncertain. My next week's a little bit uncertain. But there'll be another, a whole series of Blender streams coming. We'll be committing to at least one a week. Just bear with us while we settle into the right schedule, and we'll see you on them.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Awesome, guys. Take care. You lot rock, by the way. Oh, I'm going to see if I can end the stream a different way. I'm going to do it from my laptop by remote control rather than leaning over and showing you my armpit on the camera. So let's try and do that.
It also means that you won't cut off the stream early because of the delay.
Yes.
It sometimes happens.
Yes.
So you just get to hear us waffle at the end,
This means we need to do nothing of any use for the last 6 seconds and then hit stop, isn't it? Okay, so nothing of any use. 4, 3, 2.